Hey everyone, it's Norm from Tested, and welcome back to Projections. I know it's been a while, but we're back covering virtual reality and mixed reality hardware. And today I'm going to be reviewing the HTC Vive Pro 2. If you're watching this the day we're publishing this video, it's actually the launch day for this headset. It's shipping today. HTC announced it at their ViveCon event about a month ago alongside their standalone HTC Vive Focus 3 headset. This is the one they sent me on loan for review, and I've been testing it in all my favorite VR games for about the past week or so. And after a week of using this, I'm going to get right to the point. I'm left, honestly, feeling a bit disappointed. Not necessarily with the kind of the specs and the speeds and feeds and the experience. I think the experience is solid and good, but with, well, primarily price and also the fact that this headset isn't that exciting. It doesn't move the ball forward in VR hardware. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. So if you have been following VR hardware, the headset hardware over the past couple of years, right now, basically, the hardware is divided in essentially two camps. You have on the Oculus and Facebook side the Quest 2. It starts at $300. It plays everything in the Oculus ecosystem, whether that's locally on the headset or tethered to a PC via USB-C cable or their wireless AirLink system. And also, of course, plays games that you can buy in Steam VR. Now, if you're not into using that headset and that ecosystem, on the Steam VR desktop side, there are a couple options as well. There's the Valve Index. That's Valve's first-party headset. They put out almost 2 years ago now is when that was announced, and that was in anticipation of Half-Life Alyx, and they really wanted to move the ball forward after this whole first generation of the original Rift and the original Vive and even the Vive Pro. And then also there's the headsets on the Windows Mixed Reality side that also run Steam VR games really well. And at the top of that, it's HP. HP with their Reverb G2 that came out last year. That was a headset I really, really enjoyed. They overcame some of the hurdles of Windows Mixed Reality, specifically the controllers, and focused on a combination of optics that were co-developed by Valve and HP, along with the speaker system, with the panels that they source. These high resolution, high pixel density panels that offer just still, I think, unmatched clarity in the consumer VR space. And that leaves HTC in a kind of a weird spot because last year they released the Cosmos, and maybe the less said about that, the better. It's a little bit dead on arrival. The tracking left so much to be desired and really, unfortunately, not a good product. So it feels like they've been working on maybe a proper successor to the Vive. And while there has never been a Vive 2, they did, of course, the Vive Pro. And this looks very, very similar to a Vive Pro. In fact, it's almost exactly the same ergonomics, the design idea. I wouldn't be surprised if almost exact same injection molded molds for things like the Vive wands. They're still shipping this with the Vive wands, the blue ones that came with the Vive Pro. It's using the updated base stations for Steam VR, and it is the Lighthouse-based tracking. So you're going to get all that same type of fidelity, still I think the best-in-class tracking fidelity for home-based VR. But again, if you look at this, other than the fact that the front is black instead of blue, it looks just like a Vive Pro. They've done nothing to improve the headphones, which are fine, they're good, but they're still on-ear headphones, while the industry may have now been moving to off-ear speakers, like with the Valve Index, or even the lower quality ones on the Quest that pipe audio at your ears instead of on and in your ear. And the big difference, what they did in terms of changing this headset, is in arguably the most important part of a headset, the visuals, the display and optics stack. And so on paper, it sounds really exciting. You have a display that's two 2448 by 2448 LCD panels now, as opposed to OLED. There's still separate panels, so there is IPD adjustment with a good range up to 72 millimeters eye apart. And also it's now RGB subpixels, so high pixel fill. But really, we're talking about almost 5,000 pixels wide, even much higher resolution than you get on the Valve Index, and even higher than what you'd find on the HP Reverb G2. That was a 2160 by 2160 LCD panels per eye, although really small panels, which added to the pixel density there. These panels also go up to 120 hertz. You can run sweet spot at 90 hertz, but in the HTC Vive console, you can change the settings and boost it up to native resolution, 120 hertz if you wish. But all of that is to really service the optics, HTC's new optics for this headset. And they're even maybe bigger than the resolution is the field of view that they're advertising for this. They say it's 120 degrees, and that's horizontal field of view, not diagonal. And I'll be honest, I never felt like I got 120-degree field of view. Using HMD Tester, you can use a free application. It's almost like an eye test for headsets. You're supposed to look at these two red bars. They spread further and further apart as you adjust, and you kind of mark down when the bars disappear. That's how you can measure the horizontal and vertical field of view. And with the kind of eye relief pushed all the way, so there's a hardware eye relief to make sure the lenses and optics are pushed toward your eyes, so that pushed closest to my glasses, and the glasses do fit on here in this headset, I was able to get 107 degrees horizontal field of view, far short of the advertised 120, and vertical field of view at a theoretical maximum of 90, only 87 in that. And you can even see the way the lenses are designed, the optics design, they look more oblong, more oval. They are much wider than they are tall, even compared to the optics, the Fresnel lenses you'd find on previous headsets. And you can adjust that. So people who've had this headset for this past week, other reviewers are quick to point out that you can replace the gasket. Very simple to remove that via the Velcro. And this is actually the face pad that comes with the headset. I've replaced it with a VR cover, a really thin one that's made for the Quest actually. Fits perfectly. And that allowed me, I could take off my glasses, to push the optics and the image, the visual stack as close to my eyeballs, to a point where my eyelashes are almost touching the lenses. And with that, and using the same HMD tester, I was still only able to get 114-degree horizontal field of view and only 1 degree higher, 88-degree field of view vertically. Still short of that potential maximum of 120. Now, a lot of this will be dependent on your own personal IPD. Mine is 67, and also I was trying it without glasses. So with or without glasses changes. Everyone's facial shape and eye shape is different, but I felt like it was not that full benefit that I was getting. And their pursuit of that wide FOV, I think, does come at a cost of image quality and clarity in a couple ways. So when we also evaluate the optics of a headset, there are two things we first look out for. One is the eye box sweet spot. So this is the sweet spot. How much of the headset and how aligned do your eyes have to be with the IPD adjustment, with the actual lenses, so that you get a clear image. Sometimes it's important because if your headset's jostling around, if you're playing a really fast-paced action game, and maybe the headset, even if you have it clamped real close and tight to your head, there's going to be a little bit of wiggle, maybe not side to side, but maybe angular wiggle. And if your eye box sweet spot is small, as it is with this headset, the image will go blurry, and you'll have to constantly be adjusting with one hand. And that's unfortunately the case. Of all the headsets on the market right now, between even the Quest 2, the Valve Index, and the Reverb G2, the Vive Pro 2 has the smallest and the worst sweet spot in the eye box, unfortunately. That's not to say you're going to have a bad experience. It just means that you may have to adjust it and find that sweet spot, and again, get the ergonomics fitted perfectly to your head. And you can tell, you can do a little bit of adjustment, but you can only tilt upward with the headset. And I find that sometimes getting that sweet spot, getting it parallel to your eyes, requires tilting it down, and there's just not that adjustment with this old head strap design. The other thing we also look for is clarity, edge-to-edge clarity. Once you've found that sweet spot with the eyes, how clear is the image as you move around the entire field of view? And that's also going to be dependent on, of course, the field of view of the headset here. Because I was getting up to 114 degrees horizontally, it made sense that when I looked to the far corners of the image, started to get a little bit of chromatic aberration, a little bit of blurriness. But for the most part, the image is pretty clear throughout. The edge-to-edge clearness, certainly within like 90-degree horizontal, is clear. And I can happily say the screen door effect is not present. There are enough pixels here. The pixel density, the pixel fill is good enough that we've passed that point where we're even considering a screen door. So we're more concerned about things like the God rays that you get with Fresnel lenses that are apparent here, and how good the contrast or the brightness is. And they're going with LCD, so the contrast, if you're an OLED fan, it's not going to be as deep of the black levels as you would find on OLEDs. But for the most part, for the vast majority of that image, very clear, no mirror, no chromatic aberration until you get to the edge, and things like God rays, I think, unfortunately, with current optics are standard. The interesting thing, though, is that even though the panels themselves are, I think, based on what I've been able to find online, they're almost 2.9-inch panels, which are the same physical dimensions of the panels that are on the Reverb G2, and they're technically higher pixel density because the lenses are pulling the photons and the pixels, stretching them so you can fill them into more of your field of view. The clarity on something like the G2 and even the G1, I think it's actually sharper than what I was experiencing on the Vive Pro 2. And that's because the Reverb G2 has a much narrower field of view. And so this is a kind of almost a debate among VR users. What do you want to go for? Do you want to go for wide field of view, and does that matter? And I certainly, as a first impression, if you were to give someone this headset and show them 110, 114 degree field of view versus 90 to 100 degree diagonally field of view on something like the Quest 2 or the Reverb, it's going to immediately feel more impressive on this headset. But I can say, based on my experience, over time, it's not something that I feel is actually as impactful as pixel density and clarity of image when you're in the moment, when you're in the game. That periphery, my brain adjusts to the field of view of whatever headset I'm using, and I stop thinking like I have tunnel vision. As long as it's not narrower than 90-degree field of view, I don't feel like I'm wearing binoculars. And even though this is wider, because the vertical field of view is still relatively cramped, it doesn't feel extremely spacious. And so the trade-off of having the wider field of view, I think, does come at the cost of the sharpness and clarity that I come to expect out of a high pixel density display like on the G2. If you're a sim gamer and you're playing racing games or Elite Dangerous, I still would recommend the Reverb G2 as opposed to this in terms of just the sharpness. And that's going to depend also on your graphical settings. So interestingly here, you have to adjust the rendering resolution on the Vive console side. Native resolution, make sure it's that almost 5K. It's 2448 by 2448 per eye. And then on the Steam side as well, max it out on the Vive side and then adjust the render resolution, maybe do some oversampling if your graphics card can handle it. But also note that you cannot access motion smoothing on the Steam VR software, even with the latest update that I tried last night. Motion smoothing is only enabled on the Vive side, and the Vive's motion smoothing on my graphics card, for example, 2070 Super, I was struggling to get consistent frame rates at native res, even at 90 Hertz, because of the resolution of this. And that motion compensation, the motion smoothing is really noticeable. You definitely get some visual artifacts of things start moving around really funkily on the screen. When I talk about also the costs that HTC has put into the headset, we have to also talk about the price. And that feels like maybe the biggest disappointment with this. I wouldn't mind, that they call this the Vive Pro 2, even though this feels like maybe a zero point 0.5 incremental update. The fact that they've just updated the display and optics, and they haven't changed anything like the microphone or integrated wireless, even though it's compatible with the wireless accessory that you have to buy separately. But this is selling for, as a full kit, $1,400. Now, you probably, if you've read the press release, you knew that. You may have an opinion about that. My opinion is it's too much, frankly. I know they're saying that this is targeted to business customers, and what that means is that they believe there is a customer base out there in the business world where the difference between a $1,000 set and a $1,400 set is not that much. And the support that they're going to provide for the business customers and the IT compatibility, that's going to be worth it for them. But for consumers, it is way too much, especially when the options that you are right now, even on the high end, is $1,000 for the Vive Index. And for that, you get the better Knuckles controllers, the Valve Index controllers. Standalone wise, it's still $800 just for this headset. I still think that's a couple $100 too much. For that, I would directly compare it with the Reverb G2, which is $600 with controllers. You can even find it for $570 right now on HP's site, or you can even buy that headset by itself for $500. And if you don't want to use the Vive Wands, if you're just, again, like a sim gamer, and you're using your own HOTAS setup or your wheel setup, I again would go with the G2. And it puts this in a really curious spot. It feels like maybe they're aiming on the consumer side for people who have the original Vive and never upgraded and are looking to upgrade. For those people, I think they'll be happy with the Valve Index, where you can buy the controller separately and use that, and the headset over there is $500. Or if you have the original Vive Pro, it's again, I feel like it's an incremental upgrade and certainly not worth $800 just for this headset. It feels like too little of an upgrade, too late, because this would have been much more interesting if they announced this last year, and when the Index was in a short supply, graphic cards were maybe more available, and you had the purchasing decision between that and the G2 at launch, but also not just too little, too late, but also too expensive. And it's conceivable that at some point HTC will drop the price of this. And I certainly hope that they're listening to reviewers and the feedback and do that, because it really feels like they got to be more price competitive with the Valve Index. And I understand, I empathize with them as a company, because they're not Valve. They don't have the luxury of having millions and millions of dollars in revenue from Steam to support their business. And they're not Oculus and Facebook, who can afford to have rock bottom prices for their hardware, to have this strong footing in the hardware ecosystem. They've made the choice to push this for businesses, and for that, I get it. I get it. And if you have the income to drop $800 on a headset or $1,400 on a full set, and maybe if you have a 3080 or a 3090 or a 3080 Ti graphics card that can run this, I don't think you'll be disappointed with this. I think you'll have to make a decision of what's important to you in terms of image clarity or field of view, and you'll have to accept the fact that the field of view here isn't really that 120, and the sweet spot, I think, is a bit disappointing. That's why it's been such a frustrating past week. I really, really wanted to love this. And I don't think anyone out there is going to be disappointed if they end up buying this and using it, as long as you know what you're getting into and you know that you're probably paying, I don't even want to say the appropriate hardware cost, because HP, they put out a great headset, $600. Yeah. So I wish HTC luck. I think the more interesting hardware is probably the Vive Focus 3. That's the standalone headset using the same optics, the same display as what's in the Pro 2 here, except that also runs content locally, as well as the ability to stream from a PC, tethered, and in the future, untethered. That's one, if I have the chance to test that out, I think from a technology perspective, maybe a way to push it forward. But as VR enthusiasts, we're kind of at a stagnant point right now. It was really exciting a year and a half ago when Valve put out the Index, and that was supposed to, again, push the industry forward, but we really haven't seen that happen. I'm not sure if it's a a chicken and egg, and maybe it's the reality of hardware development. It's not easy. I'm sure the research that and experimentation and testing that HTC had to do to get even this visual stack wasn't cheap. And maybe that's just the pace of VR hardware, at least from a practical sense. Incremental updates, increases in resolution as those panels become available, more development and refining of the optics, decisions that are made in the R&D side until there's a big leapfrog in hardware experience. But this isn't it. It will play the current generation of games and the whole back catalog, all the things that people have put out on Steam VR and on Viveport very well. But I think as enthusiasts, we're waiting for the next big jump. Well, that does it for the Vive Pro 2. Before I have to send this back, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have in the comments below. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back next time with more coverage of emerging technology in the VR and mixed reality space. I'm Norm, and I'll see you next time. Bye.